All right, today we're going to dive into a really old story, but one that feels like it could have been written for today. It's about a world that's just completely falling apart, and it's about one person who had the guts to choose a different way. So let me just start by asking you a question. What happens when the bad stuff, the corruption in society, stops being shocking? What happens when it just becomes normal? Yeah, that's a pretty heavy question, right? Well, thousands of years ago, the book of Genesis gave an answer that is frankly pretty shocking. Okay, so let's set the scene here. We're talking about a world absolutely filled with violence. And look, this wasn't just a few bad apples making some poor choices. No, this was the whole system, the whole culture at a breaking point. And to really get how bad things were, you just have to listen to the words the text uses. It's so absolute. It doesn't say, people messed up sometimes. It says every single thought was only evil all the time. That's not just bad behavior. That's a diagnosis of a deeply corrupt heart. And of course, what's happening on the inside is going to spill out. The key word the story uses is violence. But we're not just talking about a fist fight here and there. This was the air people breathed. It was a culture built on harming others, on oppression, and on just destruction. It had soaked into everything. And this is where the story takes a turn you might not expect. It gets really personal, really intimate. We're talking about the grief of God. So when God looks down and sees this complete and total mess, what's the first reaction? You'd probably expect pure righteous anger, right? But that's not what we get. The first emotion described is heartbreak. I mean, this verse is just stunning. It says God regretted making us, that his heart was deeply troubled. And this is the whole point. Sin in this story isn't just about breaking some cosmic rule. It's about breaking a relationship. It causes real pain. And that sequence is so important. The judgment, the flood, it doesn't just come out of nowhere from an angry deity. It flows directly from this profound sadness, this grief. It's a response that comes from the pain of that broken relationship. But right when the story hits its absolute darkest point, there's an interruption, a plot twist. One person who breaks the pattern, one man against the entire world. Amidst all the violence, the corruption, and this divine heartbreak, we get this one simple, powerful line, but Noah. It's the pivot point. The whole story turns on these two words, on this one person who was different. So what was it about this guy? The text says he was righteous and blameless, but listen to this qualifier. In his generation. That's huge. It doesn't mean he was perfect. It means in a world that had completely lost its way, he held on to his integrity. And crucially, it says he walked with God. This implies a close, consistent, real relationship. That's what set him apart. And because of this one man's faithfulness, a whole new path opens up. And that leads us to God's two-part plan, the ark and the flood. You've really got this incredible paradox here. On one side, you have the flood, which is almost like an act of decreation. The waters of chaos are coming back to wash the world clean. But at the exact same time, you have the ark, which is all about preservation. It's a vessel of hope. It's a way through the judgment, not just an escape from it. And this wasn't some vague wishful thinking. No, this was a concrete, practical plan. God gives Noah super specific instructions. Build the ark this way, bring your family, bring the animals, and make sure you pack enough food for everyone. In the middle of total chaos, God provides a clear, tangible way to survive. So, that's the ancient story. But why does it still matter thousands of years later? Well, let's bring it all home. Let's talk about what walking with God might look like today. You know, a story like this really acts like a mirror. It forces us to look at our own world. I mean, when does violence stop being shocking and just become entertainment? When do we get so used to corruption that we just shrug and say, that's just how the world is? This story challenges that. It asks us if it's really just easier to blend in than it is to stand for something better. So what was Noah's big act of integrity? In a world spinning out of control, his response was just one of simple, focused action. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. In a culture of total rebellion, his resistance was his obedience. And all of this really leaves us with a huge question for our own lives right now. In a world that is constantly pushing and pulling on us, are we just being shaped by our culture? Or are we like Noah, called to be set apart from it by walking with God? That's the challenge of this ancient story, and it's a question worth carrying with you long after this is over.